I want you to listen. Listening is a magnetic and a strange thing, a creative force. The friends who listen to us are the ones we move toward. When we are listened to, it creates us. It makes us unfold. It makes us expand. That is a quote from Carl Menninger from the Menninger Foundation in Kansas. And it's for mental health that we need to be recognized and validated. And where does that begin? Of course, in childhood. There is a distinction, however, between listening and hearing. Listening is just taking in sound. Listening actually has to be learned. Therefore, it can be taught and must be modeled. There are effective listening habits that we can teach children. Number one, we have to pay attention. Number two, we can teach them by paying attention how to process data. And number three, by paying attention and processing data, we can teach them how to remember. The key is to make them self-actualized, to make them recognize that they're worth something, that we think they're significant by valuing what they tell us. There are three ways that we can begin. First, paraphrase or summarize in your own words when the person has just said what the person has just said. Don't be a parrot and don't summarize. I'll tell you a funny little story. My son is 33 today. Not today, but now. He'll be married in November. And when he was in kindergarten, he came home and he said, "Mommy, I hate my teacher." Having just taken parent effectiveness training, I said, "Oh, Sean, I hear you. You hate your teacher." He said, "Mommy, I do hate my teacher. She's mean." I said, "I hear you, Sean. You're telling Mommy that you do hate your teacher and your teacher is mean." He said, "Mommy, she is mean." I said, "I understand. I hear you. You're telling Mommy that your teacher is mean." And Sean said, "Quit that. Why are you repeating everything I'm saying?" I said, "I don't know, Sean. I took a course, parent effectiveness training. It's clearly not working in the real world." Why? You must be authentic with your children. You can't just mimic. When we're teaching children, they know absolutely what we are feeling. They are sensitive to us. They're looking to us for cues and feedback. Why? In the beginning, they look at us almost as an appendage. They see us as the representation of Mom and Dad, and, in effect, God. So when children look at us, especially in the early years, they're really looking at a mirror, and that mirror is reflecting back to them, they're okay. Second, express acceptance of these children's feelings and make them feel they're significant, that they're important. And then engage them. Don't cut them off. Don't give them short answers, yes, no. Engage them, relate to them. Ask questions, non-threatening questions, so they're willing to tell you. Children will tell you everything if you just listen to them. And then, because listening is really not that natural, we have to practice it. We're all very skilled at multitasking. I remember when my children were young, and I was teaching school, I was very busy. Anybody know that situation? I would talk on the phone, I'd be grading papers, and I'd be listening. And my kids would just hate that. They would say, "Mom, listen." And I'd think, but I am listening. But I wasn't actively listening. We have to pay attention. When you have young children, get down to their level, even if it means getting down on the floor. Make eye contact. Have you ever seen a child just grab onto your face and focus it so they know you're with them? that they've got you and that your energy is riding along that same wave they are. So practice techniques. Remember, it's not natural to listen. Be consistent. Practice once in a while and have like a regular time when you say to your children, I'm going to teach you how to listen, and we're going to do this together, and invest them in the process. If you invest them in the process, they'll be willing to do it because they'll have a part of that. You're not preaching to them, you're inviting them in. To do that, you have to own your own feelings. When you formulate a change in behavior, a certain way of speaking might help you. It's descriptive. You know, even in marriage counseling, if you're having a problem, the counselor will say to you, don't say what you're thinking, say what you're feeling. When you do this, I feel like I'm falling down an elevator. I'm losing my stomach. I get weak in my knees. Describe your feelings so the other person engages, connects. In our life, our busy schedules, we all forget to connect. Really, quality time is more difficult to find than money. And that is true. So, here's an example of a way of speaking. You can say to a child when he walks up to your desk and you're not happy with something he's done, Tommy or Jane, when you do blank, I think blank, and more importantly, I feel. So, therefore, my request to you is, now you've opened the door for two people, not just one person preaching. That's the first way to lose conversation. You start preaching and they turn off. I had a friend whose wife was a social worker, he was a psychiatrist, and they had a child with a hearing problem. And they didn't know how badly this child's problem affected their learning, her learning, until she was about 3. And then, of course, she had to go into a hearing aid. Well, one day, her mother was preaching, as we tend to do, and her child just turned off her hearing aid. And her mother said, don't turn me off when I'm speaking to you. But when we preach to children, either as teachers or parents, actually, we turn them off. So we have to really tune in, not just to our children, but to ourselves. We have to notice our listening patterns. And where did we get those little listening patterns? From our families. We can look right back to our own early childhood, and we can see there the roadmap to what we're doing today. If we catch that glimpse, the principle under that pattern, we can change. So describe your feelings and make yourself be felt. Create a safe space. No space is safe if a child feels vulnerable. Not even an adult will feel safe if they feel you'll use what they say against them or you'll repeat what they say. So you have to create a space where people can come together and be honest and be opened and connect in a way that allows for children to tell you what they're really feeling, which will then unburden them and relieve a lot of anxiety. My mother used to say, listen to children. They will tell you everything. But if you violate that rule of a safe environment, they won't tell you ever again. If you say to a child, I want to know what you really think of me, or you say to your mate, how am I doing? What do you really think of me? And they tell you what they really think of you, and you start defending your position and fight with them over what they've told you after you've invited them into the conversation, they will never again be honest with you because you've taught them that honesty doesn't pay. But if you say to a child, okay, what's going on? and they tell you what they feel, and you don't defend it, then they don't get invested in the outcome. And if they're not invested in the outcome, even though you may not agree with them, you've left a place that's so soft that they can return, and they may change. You've given them an opportunity to alter their behavior by not coming down in defense. It's like this. If you go to a movie and that makes you late for somebody's small dinner party, and then you arrive at their dinner party, and in that dinner party is somebody you just don't like, somebody who's competitive with you, some person who just gives you a hard time all the time. And you're about to say to the hostess, I'm really sorry we're late. We stopped by a movie, and you want to say it was a terrible movie. But before you can get that out of your mouth, the person you don't like says, you went to see that awful movie? I can't believe it. Every critic said it was horrible. Now, what are you forced to do? You're forced to say, that was an art movie. It really took sophisticated intelligence to catch it. I don't know what's wrong with you. It's the best movie I've ever seen. And the next time you see that person on the street, even before you say hello, you say, you know, you didn't like that movie, but the New York Times gave it rave reviews, the Wall Street Journal, and the Houston Chronicle. True or not, you're forced into the investment of the outcome of that exchange. Why? Because you had to defend your position. If you don't make a child defend their position, they will stay opened, and that's your best shot at having them come back to a soft space and renegotiate. And we call this the empathic process. So listen to children, use your investment of energy, but don't make them invest in the outcome. There are 3 steps to this. We have to stop what we're doing. We have to look at this child. If they're young, we get down to their physical level, and we ask them questions, and we talk to them and listen to them, and we take turns in the process, never defending our position. And there are things we can do to encourage good listening. We can play games, such as Simon says, with younger children, and Trivial Pursuits with older children. There are many techniques to teach how to listen. 50 to 75% of all school time is devoted to listening. And yet, we don't really teach it in the early years. There was a very interesting cartoon. I love this cartoon because it expresses everything in just this one commentary. A little child is looking at her daddy and bringing his face into her focus, as children do when they want your attention. And she says, Daddy, listen to me with your eyes, not just your ears. Of course, we have to show children that we're paying attention. We have to see the subtle cues, not just the verbal cues, not just what they say, but the nonverbal cues. We have to look for feedback, body language. We have to see what their faces are saying, not just their mouths. So there's a primary means of interacting with others on a personal level. You really have to be what you want to see. Children are just looking at us like little sponges and modeling us. And don't you all remember the first time you saw your own child imitate something you did? Usually it happens very young. When I talk on the phone, I tend to walk around. I've lost a child, but when she was from a heart problem, but when she was a little child, she used to follow that format. When she would pick up the phone and make believe she was talking, I would see her walk from one side of the room to the other, just modeling, just mimicking, imitating. Of course, we're just primates. That's how we learn. Be active. Pick out the highlights of conversation that are relevant. and ask relevant questions so that it's open-ended. Don't cut anyone short. Don't stop them at the pass. Children want you to listen to them. Show children how to listen by listening. No distractions. Give them feedback. Question them. No multitasking. We adults are so great at listening on the radio, talking on the telephone, watching television, cooking, and listening to our children simultaneously. In the classroom, the teacher has ears behind her back, eyes behind her back. She's multitasking all the time, and the child only wants one thing: your attention, really to validate themselves. Children have so many emotions going on, and so many times they can't articulate it. They don't have our language skills. They don't have our coping skills. They need us to help translate for them. They want to. So it takes patience. You have to listen to children whose language is not as qualified as ours. Don't pull the words out from them. Don't short-circuit their sentences. Don't cut in. Be polite. Listen to your children as you would your friends. I don't know how many of you remember Dr. Chaim Ganat. He tried being a teacher for about a month. He quit, went back, and became a psychologist. He said, this is too hard. And he always told the story of how to interact through listening. He said, if your friend wants to tell you something, you drop everything and you listen. Your child wants to tell you something, you multitask. It's really important to treat your children, to treat your students with the same value as you would your friend, your neighbor. You know, we at the workplace take all of these courses to learn how to communicate with one another. But really the priority is how to communicate with our children, to communicate with the children that we're teaching. That's our job, that's our family, that's our life. So in this way of speaking, remember what we're doing is building children. We're building the way they're going to be and how they're going to interact and connect with other people for the rest of their lives. So we want them to explain and describe their feelings. We want them to be authentic, and we want them to be aware of how they feel. And so a good way is to dramatize, to say, when you say that, I feel the way I did when my mother got lost from me as a child. That frightening feeling, that sick feeling in my stomach. Descriptive language brings them to you. And be caring, be interested, don't discount. Listen as if you have plenty of time. Respect different opinions. Kids aren't going to feel the same way we do. It doesn't matter. They're so happy when we care what they're saying. I have a very good friend who was a school teacher also. And she always said she never even thought as an adult that her opinions mattered, that anyone cared how she felt, because as a child, no one validated her, no one listened to her. We have to teach this, because what we're really teaching is all about relationships and interacting. So make eye contact. Don't discount. Invite conversation. It's so important that we value children. If we value them, they'll value themselves, have good self-images, and give you the best of who they are. Empathy is the key. You have to walk 3 months in my moccasins before you can know how I feel. We have to give kids a deeper understanding of their own thoughts and words by understanding for them what is happening, especially when they're younger. Kids love to hear about your bloopers, and it makes them feel closer. My mother used to say, listen, children will tell you everything, and it's really true. If you listen to children, soften the environment, they'll tell you everything. They want to tell you. It lowers their anxiety, it brings their problems to the surface, and you've created a safe space that they will model and take elsewhere, out of the school, out of the home and into their life and relationships. I have an elderly mother. She's 89. And one day I was talking to her about discipline, and I reminded her about her hitting me when I was little. And she said, "I never hit you." And I thought, yes, of course you did. No, not I. I never hit you. Oh, that must have been some other mother. You know, we have to be sensitive to where people are in time. We have to be sensitive to children, know their histories, know where they're coming from. Sometimes they're coming from abuse. Sometimes they're coming from families that are broken, divorced, separated, where these learning skills and listening skills clearly have broken down. When I was engaged to my husband, two people with a lot of psychology, we used to play a game. Not what are you thinking, but what are you feeling? You'd be surprised at what you hear. The important thing is not to punish anyone for really telling you how they feel. Kids imitate communication skills, and they also imitate acts of kindness. And isn't it wonderful when we see them reach out to other children and listen to them and communicate them to them? Active listening is the foundation for developing good communication skills. It requires empathy, openness, and absolutely the willingness to hear without defending positions. Don't be critical, but it's very important to be authentic. Be honest. These models of behavior transfer to life 101. What they take out of the home, they'll transfer to the classroom. What they take out of the classroom, they'll transfer to their relationships. What they transfer to their relationships will model their children, and there we see the generation of how important it is to hear one another. Kids will imitate these skills, and they are watching us. So we have to be very adult. There are many trees in our forest. There's the adult tree, and there's clearly the child tree. When we are relating to children or something important is going on in our family, it's very important to step into the adult tree. The child tree has no capacity to help us, but the adult tree can. What does that mean? It means to be proactive, not reactive. Stop. When we were kids, stop, look, and listen. It really is true. We have to stop. We have to look for cues from other people. We have to listen so we know what's going on, and then we'll know how to communicate without being reactive, and that's proactive behavior. And it has a ripple effect. It moves right into respect and mutuality. You can't have any relationship without respect and mutuality. So it's very important to be honest. It's very important to be respectful. It's very important to listen to your children in a way that values their own opinions. Listening for children has never been as important as it is today. Children today really must be heard. We're living in a very, very, very dangerous world. In a media world where kids are getting signals and cues that are very exaggerated and very dramatic, and we have to guide them into critical thinking so they can make good choices consciously for their lives. And the only way to do that is to hear them and teach them what we want them to learn and take out into the world so they won't be vulnerable. And that begins here. So don't take things that children say to you in this context personally. Stay in that adult tree. Don't assume that they mean something that they don't. Listen to them and hear them out. Don't take anything personal. Don't assume anything. And then we'll know what's next. We'll know the next step because we've heard them. And then we can reinforce with them how to be self-realized, how to be self-actualized, because we're showing them by what we're doing with them. Active listening with children have so many easy and normal steps that we think it's natural, but it really isn't. And one of the things we get into as teachers and parents is this big fear of spoiling our children. We're afraid that our kids will do what we did, they'll grow up the way we did, they won't be civilized, they won't be socialized, and so we get all caught up in all the shoulds and shouldn'ts. But in reality, what we want to do is make a healthy person. A healthy person will be able to make good choices, and it begins in the beginning. So remember, another part of that is that we have our own families, we have our own relationships, and we have parents who are getting older. And how we listen to them is also modeled by our children, and there will be this role reversal in our own lives. So there is an investment here for us to teach active listening. Ask opinions, listen to your children, remember the role reversal, and this all translates to creating special time for listening. You know, children see that link right away. They see the link between good communication and listening and happy, healthy families. When they're little, they always go to somebody else's house or somebody else's classroom, and they say, "Why can't you be like so-and-so's mother? Why can't you be like Mrs. Smith?" They're aware that something is amiss in their own relationships, and they want to be connected. They want to be heard. Pay attention to your child's face. Look to the verbal and nonverbal cues. Be clear, be direct. In effective listening, there are two kinds of communication. Instrumental, that has to do with facts. Effective, that has to do with emotions. You don't want to give mask information. You want to be clear and direct. Indirect communication never works. If I say to Tommy, "Tommy, some boy didn't do his math," Tommy really might not get it. And it's unfair for us to punish Tommy for not getting it. We have to be direct. There are 4 styles of communication, and it's important not to mask your communication and in indirect communication. So you have to be clear, you have to be direct, and when you're clear and direct, you won't be indirect. You know, people get divorces because the communication was masked. I don't know if you all remember, when I was a senior in high school, I read a Henry James short story where this couple really loves each other, and the next thing you know, they're miscommunicating, and the next thing you know, they're fighting over unseen and undiscussed problems. Next thing you know, they're divorced. In the end, they meet at the house to share division of property, and he says, "I didn't know," and she said, "I didn't know," and the problem that they thought initiated the divorce never even happened. But they got all caught up in the escalation of masked and indirect communication. So you want to be clear and direct. You don't want to be clear and indirect. You don't want to be masked. You want to be direct. And you definitely don't want to be masked and indirect. When people are masked and indirect, they get divorces. They have children that reach for peer group socialization and move beyond the family because they want someone to pay attention.